It was 7 o'clock on the same evening, and James Bond was back in his hotel. He'd had a hot bath and a cold shower. He thought that he had at last scoured the zoo smell out of his skin. He was sitting naked, except for his shorts, at one of the windows of his room, sipping a vodka and tonic, looking out into the heart of the great tragic sunset over the Golden Horn. But his eyes didn't see the torn cloth of gold and blood that hung behind the minareted stage beneath which he had caught his first glimpse of Tatiana Romanova. He was thinking of the tall, beautiful girl, with the dancer's long gait, who had walked through the drab door with a piece of paper in her hand. She had stood beside her chief and handed him the paper. All the men had looked up at her. She had blushed and looked down. What had that expression on the men's faces meant? It was more than just the way some men look at a beautiful girl. They'd shown curiosity. Well, that was reasonable. They wanted to know what was in the signal. Why were they being disturbed? But what else? There had been slyness and contempt, the way people stare at prostitutes. It had been an odd, enigmatic scene. This was part of a highly disciplined paramilitary organisation. These were serving officers, each of whom would be wary of the others. And this girl was just one of the staff, with a corporal's rank, who was now going through a normal routine. Why had they all unguardedly looked at her with this inquisitive contempt? Almost as if she was a spy who had been caught and was going to be executed. Did they suspect her? Had she given herself away? But that seemed less likely as the scene played itself out. The resident director read the signal, and the other men's eyes turned away from the girl and on to him. He said something, presumably repeating the text of the signal, and the men looked glumly back at him as if the matter did not interest them. Then the resident director looked up at the girl, and the other eyes followed his. He said something with a friendly, inquiring expression. The girl shook her head and answered briefly. The other men now looked only interested. The director said one word with a question mark on the end, and the girl blushed deeply and nodded, holding his eyes obediently. The other men smiled encouragement, slyly perhaps, but with approval. No suspicion there. No condemnation. The scene ended with a few sentences from the director, to which the girl seemed to say the equivalent of "Yes, sir," and turned and walked out of the room. When she had gone, the director said something with an expression of irony on his face, and the men laughed heartily, and the sly expression was back on their faces, as if what he had said had been obscene. Then they went back to their work. Ever since, on their way back down the tunnel, and later in Karim's office, while they discussed what Bond had seen, Bond had racked his brains for a solution to this maddening bit of dumb crambo, and now, looking without focus at the dying sun, he was still mystified. Bond finished his drink and lit another cigarette. He put the problem away and turned his mind to the girl. Tatiana Romanova. A Romanov. Well, she certainly looked like a Russian princess, or the traditional idea of one, the tall, fine-boned body that moved so gracefully and stood so well, the thick sweep of hair down to the shoulders, and the quiet authority of the profile, the wonderful Garbo-esque face with its curiously shy serenity, the contrast between the level innocence of the big, deep blue eyes and the passionate promise of a wide mouth. And the way she had blushed, and the way the long eyelashes had come down over the lowered eyes, had that been the prudery of a virgin? Bond thought not. There was the confidence of having been loved in the proud breasts and the insolently lilting behind, the assertion of a body that knows what it can be for. On what Bond had seen, could he believe that she was the sort of girl to fall in love with a photograph and a file? How could one tell? Such a girl would have a deeply romantic nature. There were dreams in the eyes and in the mouth. At that age, 24, the Soviet machine would not yet have ground the sentiment out of her. The Romanov blood might well have given her a yearning for men other than the type of modern Russian officers she'd meet, stern, cold, mechanical, basically hysterical, and because of their party education, infernally dull. It could be true. There was nothing to disprove her story and her looks. Bond wanted it to be true. The telephone rang. It was Karim. "Nothing new?" "No." "Then I will pick you up at 8. "I'll be ready." Bond laid down the receiver and slowly started to put on his clothes. Karim had been firm about the evening. Bond had wanted to stay in his hotel room and wait for the first contact to be made, a note, a telephone call, whatever it might be, but Karim had said no. The girl had been adamant that she would choose her own time and place. It would be wrong for Bond to seem a slave to her convenience. "That is bad psychology, my friend," Karim had insisted. "No girl likes a man to run when she whistles. She would despise you if you made yourself too available. From your face and your dossier, she would expect you to behave with indifference, even with insolence. She would want that. She wishes to court you, to buy a kiss," Karim had winked, "from that cruel mouth. It is with an image she has fallen in love. Behave like that image. Act the part." Bond had shrugged his shoulders. "All right, Darko, I dare say you're right. What do you suggest?" "Live the life you would normally. Go home now, have a bath and a drink. The local vodka's all right if you drown it with tonic water. If nothing happens, I'll pick you up at 8. We'll have dinner at the place a gypsy friend of mine, a man called Vavra. He's head of a tribe. I must anyway see him tonight. He's one of my best sources. He's finding out who tried to blow up my office. Some of his girls will dance for you. I will not suggest they should entertain you more intimately. You must keep your sword sharp. There is a saying, once a king, always a king, but once a knight is enough." Bond was smiling at the memory of Karim's dictum when the telephone rang again. He picked up the receiver. Oh, it was only the car. As he went down a few stairs and out to Karim in the waiting rolls, Bond admitted to himself that he was disappointed. They were climbing up the far hill through the poorer quarters above the Golden Horn when the chauffeur half turned his head and said something in a non-committal voice. Karim answered with a monosyllable. "He says a Lambretta is on our tail, a faceless one. It is of no importance. When I wish I can make a secret of my movements, often they have trailed this car for miles when there's been only a dummy in the back. A conspicuous car has its uses. They know this gypsy is a friend of mine, but I think they do not understand why. It will do no harm for them to know that we are having a night of relaxation. On a Saturday night, with a friend from England, anything else would be unusual." Bond looked back through the rear window and watched the crowded streets. From behind a stopped tram, a motor scooter showed for a minute and then was hidden by a taxi. Bond turned away. He reflected briefly on the way the Russians ran their centres. With all the money and equipment in the world, while the Secret Service put them against them, a handful of adventurous, underpaid men, like this one, with his second-hand roles, and his children to help him. Yet Karim had the run of Turkey. Perhaps, after all, the right man was better than the right machine. At 8:30 they stopped halfway up a long hill on the outskirts of Istanbul, at a dingy-looking open-air cafe with a few empty tables on the pavement. Behind it were the tops of trees over a high stone wall. They got out and the car drove off. They waited for the Lambretta, but its wasp-like buzz had stopped, and at once it was on its way back down the hill. All they saw of the driver was a glimpse of a short, squat man wearing goggles. Karim led the way through the tables and out into the cafe. It seemed empty, but a man rose up quickly from behind the till. He kept one hand below the counter, and when he saw who it was, he gave Karim a nervous, white smile. Something clanged to the floor. He stepped from behind the counter and led them out through the back and across a stretch of gravel to a door in the high wall, and after knocking once, unlocked it and waved them through. There was an orchard with plank tables dotted about under the trees. In the centre was a circle of terrazza dancing floor. Around it were strung fairy lights, now dead, on poles planted in the ground. On the far side, at a long table, about 20 people of all ages had been sitting eating, but they had put down their knives and now looked towards the door. Some children had been playing in the grass behind the table. They also were now quiet and watching. A three-quarter moon showed everything up brightly and made pools of membraned shadow under the trees. Karim and Bond walked forward. The man at the head of the table said something to the others. He got up and came to meet them. The rest returned to their dinner and the children to their games. The man greeted Karim with reserve. He stood for a few moments, making a long explanation to which Karim listened attentively, occasionally asking a question. The gypsy was an imposing theatrical figure in Macedonian dress. White shirt with full sleeves, baggy trousers, and laced soft leather top boots. His hair was a tangle of black snakes. A large, downward drooping black moustache almost hid the full red lips. The eyes were fierce and cruel on either side of a syphilitic nose. The moon glinted on the sharp line of the jaw and the high cheekbones. His right hand, which had a gold ring on the thumb, rested on the hilt of a short, curved dagger in a leather scabbard, tipped with filigree silver. The gypsy finished talking. Karim said a few words, forceful and apparently complimentary, about Bond, at the same time stretching his hand out in Bond's direction as if he was a compere in a nightclub commending a new turn. The gypsy stepped up to Bond and scrutinized him. He bowed abruptly, and Bond followed suit. The gypsy said a few words through a sardonic smile, and Karim laughed and turned to Bond. "He says, if you are ever out of work, you should come to him. He'll give you a job, taming his women and killing for him. That is a great compliment to a gajo, a foreigner. You should say something in reply." "Tell him I can't imagine he needs any help in these matters." Karim translated. The gypsy politely bared his teeth. He said something and walked back to the table, clapping his hands sharply. Two women got up and came towards him. He spoke to them curtly, and they went back to the table and picked up a large earthenware dish and disappeared among the trees. Karim took Bond's arm and led him to one side. "We have come on a bad night," he said. "The restaurant is closed. There are family troubles here which have to be solved, drastically and in private. But I am an old friend and we are invited to share their supper. It will be disgusting, but I have sent for Raki. Then we may watch, but on condition that we do not interfere. I hope you understand, my friend." Karim gave Bond's arm an additional pressure. "Whatever you see, you must not move or comment. A court has just been held and justice is to be done, their kind of justice. It's an affair of love and jealousy. Two girls of the tribe are in love with one of his sons. There is a lot of death in the air. They both threaten to kill the other to get him. If he chooses one, the unsuccessful one has sworn to kill him and the girl. It is an impasse. There is much argument in the tribe, so the son has been sent up into the hills and the two girls are to fight it out, here, tonight, to the death. The son has agreed to take the winner. The women are locked up in separate caravans. It will not be for the squeamish, but it will be a remarkable affair. It is a great privilege that we may be present. You understand? We are gajos. You will forget your sense of the proprieties. You will not interfere. They would kill you, and possibly me, if you did." "Darko," said Bond. "I have a French friend, a man called Mathis, who is head of the 2e. He once said to me, 'J'aime les sensations fortes.' I am like him. I shall not disgrace you. Men fighting women is one thing. Women fighting women is another. But what about the bomb? The bomb that blew up your office. What did he say about that?" "It was the leader of the faceless ones. He put it there himself. They came down the Golden Horn in a boat and he climbed up a ladder and fixed it to the wall. It was bad luck he didn't get me. The operation was well thought out. The man is a gangster, a Bulgarian refugee called Krylenko. I shall have a reckoning with him. God knows why they suddenly want to kill me. But I cannot allow such annoyances. I may decide to take action later tonight. I know where he lives. In case Vavra knew the answer, I told my chauffeur to come back with the necessary equipment. A fiercely attractive young girl in a thick, old-fashioned black frock with strings of gold coins around her neck and about 10 thin gold bracelets on each wrist came over from the table and swept a low, jingling curtsy in front of Karim. She said something, and Karim replied. "We are bidden to the table," said Karim. "I hope you are good at eating with your fingers. I see they're all wearing their smartest clothes tonight. That girl would be worth marrying. She has a lot of gold on her. It is a dowry." They walked over to the table. 2 places had been cleared on either side of the head gypsy. Karim gave what sounded like a polite greeting to the table. There was a curt nod of acknowledgement. They sat down. In front of each of them was a large plate of some sort of ragu, smelling strongly of garlic, a bottle of raki, a pitcher of water, and a cheap tumbler. More bottles of raki, untouched, were on the table. When Karim reached for his and poured himself half a tumblerful, everyone followed suit. Karim added some water, raised his glass. Bond did the same. Karim made a short and vehement speech, and all raised their glasses and drank. The atmosphere became easier. An old woman next to Bond passed him a long loaf of bread and said something. Bond smiled, said thank you. He broke off a piece and handed the loaf to Karim, who was picking among his ragu with thumb and forefinger. Karim took the loaf with one hand, and at the same time with the other he put a large piece of meat in his mouth and began to eat. Bond was about to do the same when Karim said sharply and quietly, "With the right hand, James. The left hand is used only for one purpose among these people." Bond halted his left hand in mid-air and moved it on to grasp the nearest raki bottle. He poured himself another half tumblerful and started to eat with his right hand. The ragu was delicious but steaming hot. Bond winced each time he dipped his fingers into it. Everyone watched the meat, and from time to time the old woman dipped her fingers into Bond's stew and chose a piece for him. When they had scoured their plates, a silver bowl of water in which rose leaves floated and a clean linen cloth were put between Bond and Karim. Bond washed his fingers and his greasy chin and turned to his host and dutifully made a short speech of thanks, which Karim translated. The table murmured its appreciation. The head gypsy bowed towards Bond and said, according to Karim, that he hated all Gajos except Bond, whom he was proud to call his friend. Then he clapped his hands sharply, and everyone got up from the table and began pulling the benches away and arranging them round the dance floor. Karim came round the table to Bond. They walked off together. "How do you feel?" "They've gone to get the 2 girls." Bond nodded. He was enjoying the evening. The scene was beautiful and thrilling, the white moon blazing down on the ring of figures now settling on the benches, the glint of gold or jewellery as somebody shifted his position, the glaring pool of terrazza all around, and the quiet sentinel trees standing guard in their black skirts of shadow. Karim led Bond to a bench where the chief gypsy sat alone. They took their places on his right. A black cat with green eyes walked slowly across the terrazza and joined a group of children who were sitting quietly as if someone was about to come onto the dance floor and teach them a lesson. It sat down and began licking its chest. Beyond the high wall a horse neighed. 2 of the gypsies looked over their shoulders towards the sound as if they were reading the cry of the horse. From the road came the silver spray of a bicycle bell as someone sped down the hill. The crouching silence was broken by the clang of a bolt being drawn. The door in the wall crashed back, and 2 girls, spitting and fighting like angry cats, hurtled through and across the grass and into the ring.